Have you done a lot of these Zoomy conversations and Zoom readings?
Actually, yes. I don't know, I'm working in Lithuanian Writers Union. I guess I told you about this organization. So the thing is that I'm participating in both sides, like organizer who organizing this heli stuff, like, Zoom conversations, and at the same time, like a poet. So people inviting me in the Zoom conversations. But for me, it's always like this thing when I inviting some poets to join me on Zoom events, I'm feeling like, okay, I'm kind of faking something maybe, because, this is kind of strange feeling.
I agree. I
But
think
at the same time, I'm very happy to see you.
I'm so pleased. I'm also really happy to see you, really, because I've had such a joy in the past reading with you and having you involved in my events, and then doing that wonderful event exactly a year ago for you, for your brilliant organization at the Paviljonas Festival in Vilnius. So it is a joy. I agree with you. I think Zoom is the most unpoetic medium that there could be. And obviously you've been part of my events. They're all about liveness.
Yeah.
And the idea that reading is not just reading from a piece of paper. It's a live material, space and movement. So when people suggest to me to do Zoom readings, I always think there's only so much we can do, which is why instead of doing that, I've done these conversations. Because I think Zoom's cool for a chat. It's good for a conversation, but it's not so good for like reading poems for an hour. So I don't know how you...
I was thinking a lot about Walter Benjamin, this thinker, and about all this aura stuff and how you can lost all of this stuff,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think to have a chance to actually talk with someone like you who's writing such interesting poetry and is doing a lot in Lithuania, and also then going to America and coming to England and your work's being translated, it's taking a difficult situation that we won't name, the unnameable situation, and just turning it into a good thing, because we can actually talk about what your work's about and where it comes from and what you're doing at the moment. Because to me, you're doing a lot in Lithuania. It's an exciting time as an outsider in Lithuanian poetry, because I know Lithuanian poetry through you and people like you. So what do you think at the moment in terms of Lithuanian poetry? Is it like an interesting time to be organizing and writing and traveling and translating?
Actually, we're not traveling a lot these days.
Don't mention that. Don't mention that.
Maybe, how you call it, like lucid dreaming or something. Poetic travels can appear. I don't know.
Poetic travels are rubbish.
Yeah, but I don't know. For example, for me, this first lockdown, because now in Lithuania we're experiencing, our second lockdown, and it's spring when this, disease appeared. We experienced our first lockdown, and during that time, I finally finished, my philosophy thesis, PhD philosophy thesis. So I don't know, on one hand, for me, it was quite challenging because I was pushed like a cultural project organizer, and manager, like, create and recreate all these programs and all, this paper stuff for all funding organizations, and, and everything was quite crazy. But at the same time, I had opportunity just to sit at home, don't turn from my, like nervous thoughts about oh my gosh, this deadline of my philosophy PhD thesis just coming and I should run from it. So it was impossible to run from it. So I think, yeah. And I think, you know, it happened not just for me, because I heard from a lot of my colleagues in Lithuania and also in other countries as well, that at some point it was not easy to run from your own inner thoughts during, you know, lockdown. So many talented artists just finished novels, new books, and, you know, all this kind of stuff. So I don't know. I think it was, on one hand, it was a challenging time, and another hand, you know, this challenging time, I guess, helped for many people who I know personally to finish something, to create something.
There's way too much poetry coming out, basically. We're all going to drown in poetry. So you're a doctor now, Dr. Kaziliūnaitė.
Yeah, I am.
Dr. Kaziliūnaitė. Amazing.
And, you know, and I told, you know, for my friends that I was, you know, just struggling with myself, with my philosophy PhD thesis around 7 years for now. So now, everywhere where I'm coming, I'm just going to call myself doctor.
Yeah.
Because I have right now, and you know, now when I'm talking about my friends about you know, ice cream or something, they can after just quote, like cite my words and told that Dr. Aušra Kaziliūnaitė thinks that, you know, this melon ice creams is the best.
You'll put it into Yelp reviews and Google reviews. As a doctor, I enjoyed this ice cream. This was the most delicious medicinal ice cream that I've ever had.
Exactly.
If I ever start to choke at a poetry reading and you're there, I'll be like, is there a doctor? I know there's a doctor, Dr. Kaziliūnaitė. If you don't save my life, you're going to get disbarred. Now, I have lots of friends who have got PhDs in.
They can send me to prison, you know.
Yeah. Malpractice, medical poetic malpractice. I think both you and I are already guilty of this. We have already been disbarred. But I have friends who have changed their bills, you know. So they get their electricity bill, their gas bill, and it says doctor. And I think they've got a doctorate in creative writing. I mean, come on. I think a philosophy doctorate, that's fine. That's the old humanities tradition. But changing your bills or your email signature, have you ever seen that when people are like, doctor, and you're like, come on, you wrote a book of poems, man.
It's an amazing idea. I should do it.
I've given you, change everything, every registration.
Everything in my life. You know?
Yeah, and change your first name to Doctor, so it's Dr. Kaziliūnaitė.
Exactly, and maybe I even should ask my cat, Ziggy, to call me Dr. Aušra Kaziliūnaitė.
Exactly, a new doctorate in cat studies, Dr. Ziggy and Dr. Kaziliūnaitė. So your PhD was on Foucault, right? Foucault and the Panopticon. Could you condense 7 years of pain into a quick description?
You know, I think I was some kind enjoying it.
Yeah. You chose a painful subject for a painful process.
Related with, you know, the subject. So.
Yeah. Your PhD was the Panopticon watching you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what was the research? What were you exploring?
Actually, I was concentrated on dystopian movies. So for me, you know, the thing that's happening now worldwide is very related with my topic.
Amazing. Yeah, you were living in your PhD then?
Maybe.
I have a picture on my wall of Jeremy Bentham, you know, stuffed. You know,
really?
they stuffed him. I'll find it for you.
Actually, I hear this story that students in this institution where he is now just was playing football with his head, if I'm right.
Yeah, that's right. Here he is. This is Jeremy Bentham,
Yeah.
stuffed, taxidermied in UCL.
Yeah.
He's on my wall next to Judge Dredd. They're my two dystopian.
Yeah.
Do you ever see the Judge Dredd film?
One of these students who played with his head football.
I wasn't one of them. No, I think the students were from King's College, you know, because UCL had stuffed Jeremy. So that's good.
Yeah.
And have you been
Good
writing a lot? Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I think maybe this recording is a little bit like late. And sometimes I'm just jumping on your sentences, sorry. Yeah, so I was saying that, you know, we are very happy to have this important thinker.
Yeah, stuffed in a jar.
Yeah.
So have you been writing a lot of poetry as you've been doing your PhD? Did the two things help each other?
I think yes, because during my PhD years, let me think. I think I finished 3 poetry books. Yeah, so yes, because my book, The Moon is a Pill, was published 2014, and second one, Encrandled Ball, 16, and now my publisher also going to publish my new book. Yeah, so 3 books.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so now I should, you know, find some interesting activity and, you know, to challenge myself. Because maybe now I should, I don't know, apply for like mathematics or some, you know, like interesting disciplines at university to challenge myself. Or if not, maybe I can just lose, you know, my ability to write poetry. So it's quite scary.
Please don't do that. I like your poetry. Please keep going. So when you were doing your research, did you see your poetry as like a relief? Instead of writing your research, you were like, you know what, I'm going to write some poems instead today. Did you procrastinate the research by writing poetry?
I'm not sure. It was kind of relief. I understand what you're trying to say, because I have few friends who just finished their novels by trying to escape their PhD thesis, you know, and it's kind of helped them just, you know, to heal from all this academic activity in creative way. But I don't think about myself like about this lucky one who succeed by doing, you know, this kind of stuff. I guess yes, creativity for me was and still is, you know, part of escaping and procrastinating, you know, not just from my academic activity, but also from my work and sometimes from my life as well. But I'm not sure, or it's somehow healing me or have some kind of therapeutic impact on me. I think sometimes it's even make me even more intense and even more nervous. So, but I guess it's kind of, you know, way of being and living, and also I like this, you know, books, we're calling it self-help books. I think it's very funny to read it, but I don't believe in this kind of stuff and this kind of reality. So for me, you know, the main task is not to become calm when I am nervous and all this kind of stuff, but sometimes I'm trying intentionally and not just intentionally to push myself to be even more nervous, because it's a very interesting way to exist sometimes and to feel many feelings. And when you're always trying to, how you say it, like annihilate yourself, like don't feel, you know, so many feelings or so many emotions, and don't have so many thoughts. You can exist, but I don't think that it's a full life to live.
I agree. And I think it's really, it relates a lot to poetry, because what you brought up there, a lot of people see poetry, reading and writing it, as therapeutic, which to me is completely alien and bizarre. I mean, it can be, but on a spectrum, right? It can make people worse.
Yeah.
And it can make the poet feel worse. I mean, it's not, I think this is a lot to do with our society's misunderstanding of, say, psychoanalytical ideas, religious ideas. It's like, oh, get everything out, you'll feel better. I don't think that's true at all. So do you think then that that's true in poetry in Lithuania and in general, and how you conceive of poetry, that people see it as an entirely positive thing, but you see it maybe as negative as well as positive? Is it like a spectrum for you?
I guess, you know, that mainly when we are talking about activities and, you know, and writing poetry is also some kind of activity. And when we are talking about relationships and about all this kind of stuff, we should deal with consequences of late capitalism. And the thing is that we're trying always to find everything around ourselves useful. And the thing is that I don't think that we should try always to project this kind of feelings and thoughts on everything that appears in our eyes and in our thoughts. And I think it's kind of cruel to act in this way with poetry, but not just with poetry, with art in general, because you trying kind of sterilize, you know, all this kind of stuff. And in this way, as artist, as a human being, you just trying to produce, you know, this stuff like fast food or something, and everything that appears is just, you know, copies of copies. And you know, and you just doing some kind of ritual, but in some way it also can be interesting, because this ritual of reproducing everything, even your own thoughts from past and everything, it's also interesting, and you can find some interesting movement, you know, like because it's also moving somehow, maybe in this circles or spiral ways or something. And I think at some point, if you're trying to see all this late capitalism circulation in society, in our inner worlds and inner thoughts, we can face some interesting and related with myths and myths, and you know, and all this kind of archaic reality, all this stuff, and all this, you know, images. Yeah, so
I agree. And I think I feel sometimes stuck between these two ends, the one end being what you just described. What's the use of my poetry? How many people read it? How does it affect people? How can we quantify the effect of some abstract moment of language, which is ridiculous and I want to resist. But I also feel the other end, you mentioned Walter Benjamin, you know, Benjamin writes about this kind of priestly inspiration in the poet, you know, the poet as a mythological figure itself who interprets reality for the readers. And these two cults seem to be the main two cults of poetry around the world. Like, how popular are you? Be more popular. If you read poetry, you'll be a better person. And then the other is, oh, he was just born a great poet. She was just born, Aušra was just born a brilliant poet, you know? And that seems to be the way that poetry is seen. And it seems like you're trying to go through the middle. So I wonder, is that like part of the tradition in Lithuania too? Like the poet as a priest type thing?
Actually, yes. Because in Lithuania, we have this kind of tradition, especially related with, you know, this break of Soviet Union, because when everything collapsed, you know, and in this that old world, and in Lithuania, poets were very important part of this, you know, myth of this collapse and all this kind of, I don't know, I guess many people still imagine this historical things like some kind of Armageddon battle, you know, like this biblical stuff, when in one last fight, just, you know, how you say, like bad and good, you know, just starting to battle just for one, paskutinis lastest fight. Yeah. And the thing is, I guess that many people, especially from older generation, but not just from older generation as well in Lithuania, still believes and has this kind of inertia that, you know, now we are living in after apocalyptic world, you know, post-apocalyptic world, and the most important battle already happened, and poets at that time were important part of this, you know, collapse of Soviet Union, because at that time many Lithuanian poets started to write kind of patriotic, you know, poems. And at first it was kind of risky thing to do because at that time government could just send you to prison or maybe to Siberia and all this, you know, not nice places if you're doing this kind of writing. And people who were at that time brave enough to do it, they just, you know, get a lot of attention. So it means that, you know, this huge stadiums, you know, places where sport activities happening. So in Lithuania, we had at that time, you know, like full, you know, stadiums of poetry lovers kind of cheering poets. So it's kind of crazy stuff, you know, especially from today's perspective, to think But yes, I guess this historical reasons are part of reason why in Lithuania we still have this poet as prophet, you know, image in our heads. And I don't know, when I started to write, my first book appeared when I was very young, you know, like 19 years old, and the title was The First Lithuanian Book. And, you know, so it was a lot of like, you know, strange stuff going on, poetry from numbers and all this kind of stuff in this book. And with this book, I tried to invent alternative reality and alternative history, because in Lithuania we have a book, Martynas Mažvydas. Martynas Mažvydas was a priest, and he was author of first Lithuanian book, and it was a religious related book, catechism, you know. And usually when you when someone in Lithuania says first Lithuanian book, usually they referring this book, first Lithuanian published book by this priest. So I tried to invent, by writing my first book, reality in which first Lithuanian printed book was like a kind of avant-garde crazy poetry book, and but not, you know, some kind catechism by priest. So at the very beginning, I tried somehow to not just escape, you know, this prophetic tradition and like, you know, religionary tradition of written word in Lithuania, but also I tried to attack it, and and but the thing is interesting because, you know, when you started to talk about it, and for example, when you a few times just mentioned, you know, this thing with yeah, but I am recognized poet and all this kind of stuff, and we can talk about these things, and we can talk, you know, about this, you know, things related with our egos, and we can try to avoid it, and we can try to fight it, but you know, very deeply inside we still find this, you know, sensible part of ourselves, and this part usually wants to be like, you know, recognized. And yeah, so I also, you know, and then from the beginning I started to fight, you know, this thing, and after year by year I also you know, just had a lot of situations when especially young people, but not just young people, just come to me and ask me questions like, and they was acting with me like some kind of teacher or guru and all this kind of stuff. And yes, you know, it's kind of not easy sometimes to follow your own theory in practice, especially when you see sparkling eyes who just gazing you and following you know, all your word. And the thing is that I always trying to talk with people, you know, and to tell them that, okay, if I wrote a few poems that you like, maybe it doesn't mean that I know all the answers. And if you like my poetry, it doesn't mean that you know what you should do tomorrow, or you should leave your boyfriend or girlfriend and all this kind of stuff. But the thing is that, you know, some people, when they like your poetry, your performances, and all this kind of stuff, sometimes they starting to, how you say in English, like idealize you. And when it's very, very hard at some point, because you feel some kind of seduction, you know, and you're thinking, oh, so maybe this time I really can, you know, just act like normal prophet poet and just to enjoy all this attention and all this kind of stuff and all these credits. But at the same time, I don't feel comfortable in this role. And I think that it's how you say, like, not right thing to do, just, you know, enjoy this power. But yes, I think it's always some kind, like, not for me. I don't know, you know, maybe for some of my colleagues, maybe they don't have this kind of struggles, and I totally okay with it. But for me, sometimes it's some kind of struggle, you know, to fight with this power circulation, not just outside, but also inside me. And the thing is that, you know, when I was a child, when I was a teenager in Lithuania, for me it was also hard to find, you know, like a strong woman, like examples, and in society, and especially in artist community in Lithuania. So sometimes when young girls just writing letters for me, and, you know, and I thinking that on maybe I should let them, you know, to idealize me, even when I don't want to be idealized. So this is not like a very easy question to answer, I guess.
Amazing. I think there's you touched on many things I'm interested in. I think what happens is that poets either have the problem that you describe, or they're jealous of that problem. Mm. And I've noticed that, say, I think in the UK and America, the equivalent is probably embodied in Joseph Brodsky, who people thought, you know, had these readings to stadiums full of people in Russia. And then when him and Czesław Miłosz and Thomas Venclava were in exile, they then want to write like them, but without the oppression. Mm-hmm. They want to be prophets, but they've got nothing to be prophets against. Mm-hmm. And so they write, I mean, especially a lot of American poets, they have that samizdat style, elusive, grand, ambitious, but actually their lives, they don't have any prophecy. So what is really fascinating to me is that not only were you mature enough at 19 to create a book that was sophisticated in the way it dismantled a previous prophecy, but also that you could be successful enough to become a prophet. Because in England, if you published a brilliant book at 19 that took down a prophecy. And in England, we don't have Venceslas or Brodsky, or we don't have any prophets. Everyone wished they were prophets, but there's no prophecy. It's amazing that there was enough reception for your work that you got to go through the full circle and then have to deal with your own battles between ego and have you just created a new prophecy, you know? So that's really, really interesting. So I wonder how you now, looking back, because I think your first book came out in 2007, if that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
So 13 years ago, you look back to a book like that, which creates that kind of impact because of your gender, because of the style, because of the way you're writing in kind of a new moment in Lithuania. It's 20 years after 1991. How do you perceive that book now? Do you like it? I mean, how did you get to that point so young?
I can show you this book actually, because I have it here. Yeah.
It's a beautiful cover.
Yeah, this is kind of piece of meat slash heart, and you know, and this barcode on it. And I have this book because, you know, last week, I guess, we had conversation by Globus Books in San Francisco. So I put these books on table and now I found it useful. Yeah,
perfect.
So, yeah. And this is, for example, yeah, and this is me. Yeah, oh, it's like very angry.
A lot of angst.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is kind of, you know, like this.
Wow.
Yeah. And all of them is same in this, you know, like
maths poems.
Yeah, and also one of my favorite one, what you asked me what I think about it. I'm thinking maybe I should try to play it again, because I had few poems like chess games written in this book, but also with words, and now I don't remember what does it mean. So yeah, so I should try to, yeah, so it's hard to find now, but I want to show one more. Yeah, so this one. So it was, you know, like, I think it's got a kind of good example, but at that time I was thinking as teenager, you know, about art and about expectations of art. Because at that time I was reading a lot of Borges, you know, like Jorge Luis Borges, and all this kind of fiction stuff was very important for me. So, and then I was thinking, at that time I was thinking that, you know, many people still, you know, doing this kind of mistake. They just, you know, reading poetry, or just, you know, watching or experiencing contemporary art, and they trying to, how you say in English, like to see in this thing like in crossword or in puzzle or on all this kind of stuff, and they trying just, you know, to realize what does it mean. And usually they just asking artists if they are brave enough, you know, audience, they just asking artists, could you tell what does it mean? And the thing is that, you know, and now when I'm thinking about my first Lithuanian book, I just think about this book like, you know, very interesting experiment and also attack against rationalism. because, you know, many people still trying to rationalize, you know, and to find the meaning of it, and always, not always, but quite often, we, not they, but also we as well, we trying, you know, to find quite trivial, quite simple meaning in all things. And so I guess that, you know, after this start in almost all my books, at some point I was enjoying beauty of absurd, and you know, so maybe the form changed. The form changed because at first I was experimenting a lot with forms, and you know, and all these appearances of poems, and also I was very interested at that time at audiovisual poetry, and as you know, I was one of a team of audiovisual poetry festival in Lithuania, TARP. So this is the thing that I guess I still can find all these things in my new writings, but I'm trying to do it, you know, at a different level now. Because before, for me, and I'm not saying that it's kind of hierarchy or something with levels, but I'm just saying that I'm doing, you know, it differently, and now I'm kind of more interested in this, you know, like meat in words. But yeah, because, you know, for me, poetry never was words. We can use words by trying to create poetry or reflect poetry, but it's just one of the tools. And when we using language, language is not just words. And also, you know, nowadays when I mainly trying to write in very simple forms and to use less words in my own writing, I still find this same, you know, need to play as like in my first book, and to make everything less simple, and also not create this illusion that we can understand everything just you know, like this, and like very easy way.
Amazing. You've got a real strong sense of your own journey and your own work, which I think can be quite rare. It sounds like you've managed to balance the instinct that must have driven you from quite a young age with also a lot of reflection. And I think it's also unique to hear that you feel like your journey has been both flat as well as up. Like you've always been interested in method and performance. I think that's really, really interesting. You went to Iowa recently in America. Did that experience change some of the way you were thinking about things, or did it make you more the same being around American poetry? Because that's very different than European poetry in many ways.
Actually, I participated in international writing program 2 years ago, so it was not like very recently, but yes. And actually, I understood many things by participating in this program, and I guess one of the most important things for me was you know what, I'm not a robot, and it means that I can't handle very intense appearances in the public, and that sometimes I really need breaks, you know, like just to be alone and don't go on the stage and not do this kind of stuff. Because before I was, you know, maybe too optimistic about my own energy, and maybe I was not so, how to say, not so sensitive, and I wasted my energy a lot. And after Iowa, I understood that sometimes I also need time to rest and time to think. And if I'm participating in too many events, it's also can had not very good impact on me. It was one thing, and I think it's very important for all artists, you know, to show attention to their own, how to say, like feelings, and also this kind of, you know, rest, and not just be working every time. Because you know, it's very tricky thing, because as artists we usually think that this activity that we are doing is not work. We are playing, we are enjoying, and we are having fun by doing these things. But it's true, but at the same time it's not full true, and and you can get very tired by ignoring your own body and your own like mental health and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, so, and another thing that I learned and realized by being in United States, because we had a kind of intense schedule, like with a lot of events and many activities and many opportunities. I also realized that, you know, in a lot of countries and in a lot of places, people writing many very, very interesting texts, and, you know, literature, as I knew before, is just a very small part of literature that's happening each day all around the world. And I guess I still don't know a lot about, you know, things that are happening everywhere, but till international writing program, I was kind of doubting and trying to doubt this Europocentric idea of culture and of literature and everything. But yes, it was like more knowing, but not feeling. And after 2018, when I had opportunity to live literally together in same building with 30 writers from all around the world, you know, like writers from Nigeria, from Mongolia, from Venezuela, and, you know, from many countries. I just, you know, get this sense and this opportunity to learn about a lot of different literatures who also are part of, you know, one literature as we understand, but before I didn't know almost anything about Arabic literature, and also okay, I was reading Japanese writers, but just very, very, you know, like known writers, like, and yeah, so I get opportunity just to understand, you know, the thing that things that I am writing is just, you know, small piece of sand in all this huge, like sand clock or something, you know, what's happening. Yeah, so, and I think it's kind of relieving feeling when you understand that you are very small part of, you know, a huge circulation that's happening, you know, each day, even maybe less visible. And it's kind of relieving feeling, I guess, because then you just can relax and understand that you can do whatever you want. And yeah.
It's definitely one of the reasons why I try and travel and organize as much as possible, because I do think it's good for the soul to have a proper immediate, I mean, as you say, it can be a conceptual experience. You know that there's people writing everywhere, but I think when you go to a writer's workshop, a festival, you turn up at a festival and there's 40 different poets, you just realize how no one cares about your poetry at all in any real way. I mean, it's not quite true of you, Aušra, because it's a bit different, but it's been so nice to talk to you. Thank you for your really generous answers as well. Really wonderful to get an insight into the work you've been doing, and also how key your work is to what's happening in Lithuania now. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me here, Stephen. It's always nice to see you.
Yeah, I hope the next time we see each other is in person in Vilnius or London or somewhere else.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day, Aušra.
You too. Thank you, Stephen. Bye.
Bye.